Welcome to this special edition of the NWA XCHANGE podcast. This interview was made possible by the support of the Grove Comedy Club and Entertainment Complex and the Goat Lab Brewery. Today we're joined by Mike Armstrong. Mike is a candidate for Benton County Family Court Judge. Get ready for an insightful conversation about justice, family, and the future of our community. Let's get started.
Well, hey, Mike, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us and help educate the voters about your race. Why don't you just tell us a little about yourself?
Well, I went to law school in 2005. I was a little bit older, 2002, graduated in 05. I was a little bit older when I went back to law school, non-traditional law student. Prior to that, I had actually graduated from Arkansas State over in Jonesboro back in '94. Worked for FedEx for a while in management. They moved me to Florida, lived there for a while, and decided I wanted to go back to law school. And so did that, graduated in 05. And from there, did a little bit of private practice for a couple of years, and then was asked to come to the Benton County Prosecutor's Office. That was about 07, somewhere in there. At that office, I handled child sex crimes. That was my whole job there, and I was the only one in the office doing it. That's the way I used to do it at the time. I don't think they do that still, but they may. But my office was in the Children's Advocacy Center, which is where all the interviews take place. They interview all the kids there. You know, the DHS comes out there, and the Crimes Against Children Division, State Police, they host the interviews out there, and they watch them. And so for Benton County, that is where child crime interviews take place. And my office was actually in that building, probably 30 steps away from the interview room, and I watched hundreds, if not well over 1,000 interviews in a couple of years I was at that prosecutor's office of kids who'd, been through awful. And that really stuck with me, obviously. I mean, that's a difficult job, to say the least. Nowhere near as tough as what the kids had to go through, and wish I'd never had to learn what those kids had to go through. But it just taught me really just how important these jobs are to protecting children. Our courts are to protecting children, and the use of the courts. Just as a practicing lawyer, I got a good sense of just what we need in this community to protect our kids. And from there, I actually left the prosecutor's office and worked at Walmart for a couple of years. And it just got completely out of the law. I had a business background, worked for FedEx for a while, and just kind of wanted to see how my law experience and my business background could kind of merge and maybe take off a career that way. But the law drew me back, and a couple of years later I was right back in it. And I think probably 2010 is when I came back to practice the law, so about 15 years ago. And since then it's been almost exclusively family law cases. Divorces and custody cases and adoptions and guardianships, all of those, same cases that Judge Francis' court, that's the court I'm running for, hears every day. And I've been in private practice since then, 3 different law firms. I've owned 2 of them, but it's been pretty consistent since that time. I've handled almost exclusively family law cases.
As a former attorney advocating zealously for clients, how do you make the switch to being an impartial judge?
It's an easy switch to judge in the family law position, because when you're an attorney handling as many cases as I've handled or fought for every side of a case that you could imagine. I mean, every perspective on a case. Dads and moms and husbands and wives and grandparents. All of these different sides of it. I've argued one position on a Tuesday and gone back into court and argued the opposite position on a Thursday, because that's the role of a lawyer. That's what our job is, right? Is to be an advocate and a mouthpiece for our clients. And so transferring from that to the bench, to the judicial spot, that experience, I think, is probably the most valuable I'd have, because I know I can see kind of where both sides are coming from, the strengths, the weaknesses, how the kids fit into all of that. And I think I've got a pretty strong insight into what's not being said, into what's kind of happening behind the scenes that maybe you don't, get to see a lot of in a courtroom as a judge, but you need those instincts to really make good decisions for kids and for families as a judge. And I think the only way to get those instincts, to grow that, is to have that experience, is to represent families, represent the people of our community in these kinds of cases.
What are the most criminal charges that you see from the private practice?
I've handled all kinds of cases. I mean, right.
From a criminal's perspective, what do
Yeah.
you see that?
So from a criminal standpoint, when I left the prosecutor's office, you kind of, because of the experience I had and the other attorneys I'd worked with, you kind of cases get directed towards you. I handled a lot of the defense side of sex crimes and violent crimes. But in law, and in a law practice, it kind of chooses you more than you choose it. And so gradually, my practice shifted toward family law. I've handled all types of criminal cases.
Okay.
I mean, everything down to from minor in possession misdemeanors all the way up to rape cases. And then of course prosecuting those criminal cases. I've prosecuted probably the worst of the worst, I would imagine. So I've handled that kind of stuff. But I think it's important to remember that the position that I'm running for is a family court spot. That's where the focus is.
Right.
Judge France doesn't handle any criminal cases at all.
If you had the authority to change any law, which law would it be and why?
Oh man, I don't know. I don't know that actually it'd be appropriate for me to answer that question, to be honest with you, just because I think it's a commentary on the legislature's role. And I don't think I can do that as as a sitting judge. I think I might run up against laws that if I can't make an opinion about that I don't like now, because it might color.
Yeah, the judicial canons kind of limit you from some of the questions
They
you
do,
can answer.
yeah.
So
The
we certainly understand that,
Yeah.
and we don't want you to. We don't want to pressure you into anything unethical. So.
I appreciate that. It's good.
What advice would you give someone that's been charged or criminally charged in Benton County? Someone that from your own perspective, like person to person, what would you give them for advice? If they've been charged with a criminal, have a criminal charge?
I think get a good lawyer. I mean, really, that's, and listen to your lawyer. I think it's a pretty tricky question to answer because there's so many factors involved. I mean, I go back to just making sure you have a good lawyer,
right.
And getting good advice, and make sure you stay in touch with your lawyer, making sure that your lawyer knows everything about your case. I can't tell you how many times that I've been left in the dark by my clients about things that I think would have helped me
right.
negotiate with the prosecutor, helped me fight for them, and I don't find out about it. Or I find out about it the wrong way. I find out about it when discovery comes to me, when the evidence comes to me and I see it, or the prosecutor brings it to my attention. So I think that you have to trust your lawyer. You got to trust the guy or girl in the room with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to be open and transparent and don't hold anything back, because it's the only way that you're going to get a good defense.
Okay.
If a former client, colleague, or attorney that you were in opposition to appears in front of your courtroom as a judge, how do you handle that? Would you recuse yourself, or how would you handle just being impartial to those people that you've worked kind of against or on the other side of the bench?
So the client part of it, I'd recuse. I could not be a judge in front of any client that I've represented before. That's an automatic recusal. Same thing with somebody who's on the other side, the party who's on the other side. The lawyers, though, there's no reason to recuse there. My impartiality must be for the parties, for the evidence, and for the decision I make. And the lawyers and the judges see that you're a mouthpiece for your clients. That's what you are, and you're paid to do that. And experienced judges will look out there and listen to the evidence, and they will observe a case or sit through a case, and they listen to the witnesses. They don't care what the lawyers have to say too much. They listen to the witnesses. They read the exhibits, and that's the evidence that they are supposed to make decisions from, right? Lawyers can argue a case, right? You can get up and stand in closing argument and make your argument, but that's not evidence. And it can sway the judge one way or another, or maybe not. The evidence comes from the people in the chairs, the people who are testifying.
Right.
And if you apply the law to that evidence, it doesn't matter who the lawyers are, whether you've been antagonistic with them before. I get along with just about everybody in the bar, so that's not really an issue for me. You are going to face these lawyers no matter what. I've been doing this as long as I have, I've faced a lot of different lawyers. I couldn't recuse from those cases because I have no lawyers in my courtroom. So,
Sure.
yeah.
What do you think the most pressing issues are in Benton County judicial system with in the next 5 or 10 years? What in your perspective, the focus, where the focus should be?
Well, if I like what they've done recently with adding this 8th circuit, this 8th position, or 8th division, which is going to handle criminal cases, because a crowded docket, I think, is the biggest problem we're having. And so the 8th position is going to take 25, I think it's 25, don't quote me on that, but I mean, I think it's 25% of the criminal cases are supposed to go to this new division because there's just so much work that's being done. Work leads to delays. Delays leads to justice not being served, and that's bad for the community. When you look at the family law cases, Arkansas ranks #1 in divorce rate in the country. Wow. We got a lot of divorce cases around here. And so I think that plagues our system. It's just a crowded docket, an inefficient docket, and backups. And to address that, I think, especially when we're talking about family court and this whole idea of, or the issue where it's we have the more divorces per capita than any other state in the country. I think you've got to be efficient. You've got to come into court ready to make decisions. And I would that's my experience, right? That's what I do. So on day one, I can make a decision for a family that hopefully has a lasting impact on that family, 2 months, 2 years, 7 years down the road, so they don't come back into court. And it thins out, hopefully, these recurring cases, which we got enough new divorces. Handling fights down the road, which is absolutely part of the job, is just cause for more crowding in the docket.
So both you and your opponent expressed strong support for the Constitution. So how would you describe judicial philosophy versus activism?
Oh, I think that being a pretty strict constructionalist, following the Constitution, you can't go wrong with that. These kinds of cases, though, family law cases in particular, the #1 rule is always what's in the best interest of a child. And so how does that blend with the Constitution, right? That's a tough gray area that judges, a tough needle to thread, right? That's a gray area that judges have to face every day. You've got a Supreme Court case, Troxler, which says that parents have an absolute right to raise their children, basically any way they see fit, so long as they're not harming them. That's an interpretation of the Constitution from the U.S. Supreme Court. It's a very important ruling. At the same time, you've got to not allow children, to the best you can as a judge, be put in harm's way. And how do you balance those things out? That's the tricky part. So when you always have in your head, I think, as a judge, I got to follow the rules. They're out there. The legislature gave us a rule book to follow, and the courts have interpreted the rules that way, and that's what we have to do. So we have the rule book, but you have children, real people involved, real families involved, and you've got to try to make that a safe place for those kids and a good place for these families. And so you blend it as best you can. I think you always have to do what's in the best interest of a child, but you always have to keep in mind the rules as well. And there's Judge Scott, who's here in Benton County, is famous for saying, and I think he's actually quoting a different judge, but when he comes out and when he's going to give you a ruling that he may or may not agree with, and you can tell, he says, "I am not a king." And that's his indicator that he's following the law, whether he likes it or not. He's not being an activist. He's following the law. And I think that's probably the model that I would follow most.
Okay. Is there a particular case or a mentor that you look up to, or something that really was profound in your life?
Oh, I have. There are several older lawyers that are either retiring or soon to be retired that have really been mentors to me. I mean, Scott Smith, Greg Clark, Eldon Cripps, these are guys that I've trusted and I've gone to and have really mentored me and really taught me how to do this job. Okay. And how to do it well and how to put children first. My partner, Johnny Rhodes, has been practicing law for well over 35 years, and she's been a fantastic mentor to me. And so I think that experience absolutely is invaluable, and leaning on that experience to help you in your practice is the only way to do it.
If you're elected, do you plan on implementing any specialized courts, any night courts or mental health related courts? Is there any of those that you have plans for that you think would be beneficial?
I think that stuff would be absolutely beneficial, can be beneficial, yeah. Specialized courts, the Judge Francis docket being 75% family law and 25% civil, there isn't really an option for that. Like there's not a need for, you're talking about more like criminal cases where people can have veterans court, drug court, those kinds of things, DWI court, those specialized courts. Night court is great for district courts, which handle misdemeanors and traffic tickets because people who don't have lawyers and come in after work and you're available to them. I think it's fantastic. But it isn't the docket that I'm seeking to fill. I think if there's an opportunity, though, I'm open to it. People need to have access to the courts. People need to trust the courts, and they need to have access to the courts. And if there is a way for me to do that that I can't think of today, but becomes apparent to me later, I'm absolutely open to implementing that. Anything to give people what they need, the community what it needs to trust our system.
People want to believe in the system. You watch a lot of social media and people have been really twisted and feel like the system's against them. What can you say to those folks that don't think they have a voice?
You'll be heard in my court. I'll listen to you in my court. You walk in that courtroom and I will treat you with dignity and fairness and respect every day, every time. I've seen courtrooms, rarely, and none here in Benton County, but across the state, where it can kind of get out of hand. And you can watch it as a lawyer, either in the case or sitting in the cheap seats watching, and it just feels like there's not the respect that people are looking for. And I think that is where you get mistrust of the system. I think you need to keep politics out of the courtroom. I think you got to have judicial independence. That's going to help people trust the system. And consistency. People need to know that they're being heard and they know that they're going to get a consistent result from a judge. It's so important. Anytime you ask for help from another lawyer or you're giving your advice to a client, the first question the lawyer's going to ask you is, well, who's the judge? That tells you everything about what you need to know about a particular case, because the result could potentially change depending on which judge you have. And that's human nature. Right? People just see the world differently. That's just the way it is. But as long as, when they say, well, who's your judge? Judge Armstrong, well, he's going to rule this way. And as long as you get that reputation and that's the way that you are seen professionally, then I think you're doing a service to the community that way, because they have an expectation now. Walk into Judge Armstrong's court, this is going to be the result. You may not like it, but it's consistent and it's fair, and he's going to listen to you.
You mentioned that Arkansas has some of the highest divorce rates. Do you have an idea of why that is, or what's the contributing factor? Why is Arkansas kind of doing bad in that area compared to other states?
I think that's a mystifying question. It really is. I'm not a mental health professional who's analyzed that stuff and has any kind of idea. Poverty is always a root source of problems in our society. And I'm certain it has a hand in that as well. Is it transients maybe from other? We have, especially in Northwest Arkansas, we have so many people from other states and countries, frankly, coming into our area. Does that mean that the numbers are artificially kind of higher because we have people who aren't from Arkansas who come here and get divorced? Maybe that's part of it too.
That's a valid point.
Yeah, you definitely see it here. I have a lot of clients who aren't from here, and that's how I see it. That's how I come to it, because, if I've got 60 or 70 cases, which I typically do, my docket's about 60, 70 cases big at any given time of the year, 30 of them are from people who aren't from here, maybe 40, depending on so that could very well be it, right? It's kind of inflated because of that. But I think it comes down to education, comes down to poverty. I do think that those are just inherent problems that divorce is more of a symptom of than anything else.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like the viewers to know?
you know, I think I just want to reiterate that this is a job that needs experience. When you walk January 2nd, 2027, there's going to be a case that has to be decided that day. And I'm going to know how to decide it. I'm going to know how a decision I make that day is going to impact this family. I'm going to understand kind of the unwritten part of, or the unspoken part of what is going on behind the scenes. And the experience I've had is going to help me create those solutions. And that's what our community needs. We need solid solutions to help people. Like I said, divorce rate highest in the country, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, that is staggering.
It is. And when you look at second marriages, it gets even higher. We blow everybody out of the water on second marriages, especially for men. And so it is a problem. And so what I want people to understand about me with my experience is that I will bring solutions. It is impossible, I think, to walk into a courtroom without any experience in this kind of field and really come up with a good, solid solution for tricky questions. Because this isn't black and white, just civil contract law or disputes, boundary line dispute. This is people's lives, right? These are real people who have different experiences in their lives and who come to it from a different place and who have been raised differently and have gone through things that are, some of them, unspeakable. And to be able to fashion a solution for them is what our community needs. And the only way to get that is through experience, is to represent those people and to know what's going on in their lives and have them dump their whole lives onto you so you can help find a solution for them. And that experience is absolutely invaluable, and it's, I think, the best thing for this community.
If the voters or the viewers of this podcast would like to find out more information about you and your campaign or even get involved, how would they do so?
So my website is votemikearmstrong.com. Mike for Judge is my Instagram handle, and Mike Armstrong for Family Court Judge is my Facebook page.
Okay. Mike, the election is March 3rd?
March 3rd.
March 3rd. So.
Early voting starts a couple of weeks before that. So get out and vote.
Excellent. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Okay.
I'm Mike Armstrong, and you're watching NWA XCHANGE.